There's a moment on certain boats when something shifts. You step aboard carrying all the usual expectations. You notice the dock lines, the railings, the engine noise, the narrow side decks. Your brain still says, I'm on a boat. Then 10 minutes later, your shoes are off. Your coffee is sitting by the window. You're looking around the cabin, wondering where you'd keep a sweater, where you'd leave a book, where you'd sit during rain. And without really noticing, the boat stops feeling like transportation. It starts feeling like home. That's what this list is about. Not the biggest trawlers, not the most luxurious, not the most expensive. These are the smaller boats that somehow feel deeply livable once you're inside them. Boats that create that rare feeling where you can instantly imagine staying longer than planned. A weekend becomes a week becomes a season, and sometimes people never really move back off them. So while you're watching, try to picture yourself actually living aboard one, waking up inside it, making breakfast inside it, watching weather roll past the windows from inside it, because some of these small trawlers feel far more like floating homes than boats, and maybe none of them do that better than the Camano 31. The Camano doesn't announce itself loudly. At first glance, it looks compact, practical, even modest. You see one tied to a dock and it doesn't feel oversized or dramatic. Then you step inside, and suddenly the scale feels completely different. The cabin feels warm immediately. Not visually warm, emotionally warm. Like the kind of space you settle into fast. There's something about the helm being part of the living space that changes everything. You're not separated from the cabin while underway. You're inside it, still part of the room. That makes it feel less like driving a boat and more like being inside a small moving cottage. The windows help too. So much light comes in that the space feels open even on gray days. And when the weather turns rough outside, the contrast gets even better. Warm cabin, cool air outside the glass, maybe rain moving across the windshield. That Pacific Northwest feeling. The Camano does that incredibly well. It feels protected, but never closed in. And because the layout is so efficient, it feels larger than it measures without trying to fake space. Nothing oversized, nothing wasted. Everything earns its place. That's usually the sign of a truly livable small boat, and it's why so many owners become deeply attached to them, not because they're impressive, because they're comforting. Then there's the Ranger Tug R29, and this boat feels different right away. If the Camano feels like a floating cottage, the Ranger feels more like a tiny waterfront apartment. Everything feels carefully packed together, but somehow never cramped. That's the impressive part. The galley feels real, like a place you'd actually cook, not just reheat something quickly. The dinette feels like somewhere you'd actually sit with a laptop for hours or eat dinner while watching the water through the glass. The sleeping space feels tucked away enough to feel separate, private. And because everything connects so naturally, the whole boat feels complete. That's the word, complete. You don't walk through it thinking about what's missing. You walk through it thinking, this would work. And that's very different. A lot of small boats feel like compromises. The Ranger feels intentional, like someone started with the idea of living comfortably in a small footprint and designed around that from day one. You can picture everyday life aboard it easily. Coffee in the morning at anchor, groceries stacked in the galley, blanket on the seat, phone charging by the helm, wet jacket hanging near the door. Those little details matter, because that's what makes a boat feel lived in. And boats that feel easy to live in start feeling like home very quickly. But if those two boats feel surprisingly home-like, the next one feels like stepping into a cabin by the water that just happens to float. That boat is the Nordic Tug 34, and the feeling hits differently here. With the Camano and the Ranger, the surprise is how much fits inside. With the Nordic Tug, the surprise is how it feels once you close the door behind you. It gets quiet, soft quiet, the kind where outside still exists, but feels a little farther away. And suddenly the cabin feels less like part of the weather and more like shelter from it. That's a huge reason people love these boats. The interior has real warmth to it. Wood around the cabin, big windows, deep seating, a raised pilot house view that feels protected without feeling disconnected. It almost feels like sitting in a small waterfront cabin overlooking the bay. Except the view changes every morning. You can picture waking up early inside one. Kettle on, cabin still dim, gray light coming through the windows, maybe fog sitting over the marina, and the boat gently moving against the lines. That's not really a boating fantasy anymore, that's home. And the Nordic Tug does that better than most boats its size. Then there's the Mainship 34, and this one feels home-like in a completely different way. The Mainship doesn't feel like a cabin, it feels like a little apartment. You walk inside and the salon opens up immediately. There's room to sit comfortably, room to stretch out, room to actually spend time indoors without feeling like you're waiting to go outside. That matters more than people expect, because life aboard isn't always happening on deck. Sometimes it's rainy, sometimes it's windy, sometimes it's cold enough that the entire day happens inside. And on those days, space feels different. The Mainship handles that incredibly well. The salon becomes the center of the boat. You can picture breakfast there, dinner there, reading there, working there, watching the anchorage through the windows there. And because the layout feels open and domestic, it creates that dangerous little thought many great live-aboard boats create. I could stay here way longer than planned. Maybe a month, maybe a season, maybe more. That's when a trawler starts becoming something else, not a getaway, a living space. And then we get to the Monk 36, which feels almost timeless the second you step aboard. Some boats feel modern, some boats feel efficient. The Monk feels familiar, even if you've never been on one before. There's something instantly comfortable about it. The proportions feel right, the wood feels warm, the salon feels calm. Nothing inside feels rushed or overly designed. And that's exactly why it works. The Monk has that rare quality older boats sometimes have, where the space doesn't feel engineered to impress, it feels arranged to be lived in. There's a difference, you notice it in the windows, in the seating, in the rhythm of the layout, even in how light moves through the cabin during the day. Everything feels relaxed, uncomplicated, comfortable, like a place where routines would form naturally. Morning coffee in the same corner, book by the same window, dinner with the hatch open, rain against the glass at night, and over time, the boat becomes less like somewhere you stay, and more like somewhere you return to. But if the Monk feels warm and timeless, the next boat feels even more protected, almost like a small home built to travel through bad weather. That boat is the American Tug 34. And what makes this one feel so home-like isn't size, it's comfort. The moment you're inside, there's this feeling that everything around you was designed to make bad weather feel smaller. The cabin feels secure, warm, protected, like the kind of place where outside conditions stop mattering as much the second the door closes. That changes how a boat feels completely. Wind can be blowing across the marina. Rain can be hitting the windows. And inside, it still feels calm. You can sit at the dinette with something hot to drink and barely notice what's happening outside. That's a powerful feeling on a boat, because comfort afloat isn't just soft cushions or nice finishes, it's psychological. It's the feeling that you'd be happy staying in for the entire day. And the American Tug has that. The pilot house becomes part of the living space. The windows pull the outside in without letting the weather in with it. And the layout feels incredibly natural for long stays aboard. You can imagine weeks passing comfortably without needing much more. Then there's the final boat on this list. And this one may be the smallest, but also one of the easiest to fall in love with. The Rosborough RF-246. This boat feels less like a yacht and more like a tiny floating retreat, a place to disappear for a while, a place to slow down, a place where the size almost becomes part of the charm. because nothing feels oversized here, but everything feels close. The cabin wraps around you, the windows feel nearby, the seating feels intimate, and instead of trying to feel large, the boat feels personal. And sometimes it feels even more like home, because home doesn't always mean space. Sometimes it means familiarity, comfort, warmth, a place where everything is within reach, a place where routines become simple, coffee on the counter, a jacket hanging by the door, shoes kicked off in the same corner, water moving gently outside, and somewhere along the way, the boat stops feeling temporary. That's what makes these small trawlers so interesting. The Camano 31, the Ranger Tug R29, the Nordic Tug 34, the Mainship 34, the Monk 36, the American Tug 34, the Rosborough RF-246. None of them are enormous. None of them need to be. Because the boats that feel most like home usually aren't the biggest ones. They're the ones that feel right at the end of the day. The ones where you can picture staying one more night, then another, then maybe not leaving anytime soon. And maybe that's the magic of a really good small trawler. Not that it takes you somewhere, but that once you arrive, you don't feel like going anywhere else.